Okay, I think I'm recording it now. Yes. Okay, so we need to create all these users and give them the appropriate access. In addition to that, we need to configure remote access, okay, for a bunch of the users. Let me publish this create groups and users assignment. And the other assignment that we want to play around with today, that's the first one. The other one is we want to enable SSH access. Okay? So we want to install and configure SSH so that users can only access a remote system using a public-private key pair. Okay? Password access should be disabled. Okay, I think I'm going to change this. Direct access to root should be disabled. I'm going to change that. Members of the dev group should only have access. So here we go. Members of the dev group should only have access to the web server. Okay, so the development group. Okay, so these development users log on here, but they should have access to the web server. Okay. And both members of the security group should have access to the firewall, the file server, and the web server. So the two security users, Sue and Sarah, they should have access to the Gen 2 system, to the Ubuntu system, to the two Ubuntu systems, okay? Using SSH. So all of that access needs to be configured for these users need to be created and the SSH access needs to be created, okay? So let's talk about SSH for just a minute. Because understanding SSH is an important component of this. Where did I have that file? Not there. Here we are. Okay, Zeke, you're saying there's still no sound.
There should be green light. It's oh yeah.
Because you're
No,
Is it either in his laptop?
everything I see on, it looks like everything here is set.
Yeah. Is his laptop muted or is his audio?
Here, someone else join the Zoom.
on the Zoom, it looks like it's on, it shows up the like green outline.
Yeah, so it should.
Yeah, but are you getting on your phone?
I'm just putting my comparison for that. That's
It's whole always going to sound like zero. No. So, like you go to the Windows, you go to the audio, and then you
Okay, in any of your classes, you talked about public key encryption?
No.
No? Okay. So the two types of encryption that we should be aware of. Okay, symmetric encryption is you have one key, okay? With that one key, you take clear text, meaning unencrypted text, just plain text. You provide it to the encryption algorithm with the key and you get encrypted data out the other side, okay? Symmetric encryption means that you can reverse that process. If you take your encrypted data, you supply it to your encryption algorithm, you give it the same key, and you get clear text back, okay? So it goes both ways. Okay, same key, same encryption algorithm, both encrypts and decrypts your data. Asymmetric encryption is very different. Asymmetric encryption, you take a clear text, an input data stream, you provide a private key. Okay, a private key is a combination of two quite large, probably prime numbers. Okay, so these two prime numbers constitute a private key. This private key is mathematically coupled to a public key. Okay, the mathematic coupling occurs by taking these two large prime numbers, multiplying them together to get one even larger number that is the product of these two prime numbers. Okay, so these two the private key then encrypts data, and that encrypted data stream can then be decrypted using the public key. Okay, so we have two keys, a private key and a public key. Our clear text is encrypted with the private key and can only be decrypted with the public key. Okay, and then we get our, this should say encrypted text data stream. That's wrong. Let's change that. Encrypted text output data stream. Okay, so what happens when we reverse this process?
It's locked. So right next to it, public is search for fingers. Yeah.
We check your depth. So it's up.
Oh, sorry, that's wrong. Oh, no, that was right. I had it right the first time. Okay, so when we want to reverse the process, we can take, okay, clear text on this side, pipe it through the public key, it gets encrypted, and the only person who can decrypt it is the owner of this private key. Okay, so because these two are mathematically coupled, the information, transferring information between a source and a destination can be ensured to be secure because we can give our public key to anybody, right? As long as we keep our private key private, then nobody can decrypt the data that's sent to us, okay? And data that we send out is guaranteed to be associated with us, okay? So what does this mean in terms of public-private keys, and how do we use that for our SSH? Okay, so here's another diagram that I slapped together. Let's get rid of some of this stuff so we can. Okay, so if we here on a client system want to communicate with somebody else, we generate a public and a private key pair. Okay, we do this using an SSH algorithm called SSH-keygen. Okay, that keygen algorithm generates two keys, a private key, okay, which is a combination of two reasonably large, probably prime numbers, okay, and a public key, which is mathematically coupled to it, okay? So the encryption or the association of this key is not sensitive. We can take that key and we can do anything we want with it, publish it out on a web page so other people can see it. So if we want to communicate with a server, let's say we want to be able to communicate securely with this server has SSH running on port 22, listening for incoming connections, and we want to communicate with that system securely. What we can do is, once we've generated our two keys here, we take our public key and we transfer it up to the server and we put it in our home directory. That's a little tilde right there. Okay, we put it in the .ssh/authorized keys file. Okay, this is a special file that's designated for the storage of the keys. We take the key, okay, and we specify the type of key it is. For example, SSH-RSA. There's two types of keys, RSA and DSA, I think. Okay, RSA is the more common one. So we specify the type of key, the actual key, And then we specify a comment field. Okay, this last one typically is used to specify who that key is associated with. Okay, so it might be my username on a particular system. Okay, so we can take that public key, we put it up on the server in that authorized keys file. Then when we attempt to log into this system, we use our private key, supply an encryption test to this remote system. This system accesses our public key and can verify that we are who we say we are and that we're allowed to get into the system. Okay, so this authenticates the user on a client system to the server. Okay, SSH is bidirectional. There's another component whereby the server is authenticating to us, the client, so we're ensured that we are actually communicating with the server that we think we are. Okay, so if somebody tried to perform a little man in the middle attack or something like that and impersonate this server, the only way we would know that we weren't communicating with this server is because the server does the exact same thing. Okay, the server generates a public private key pair, okay, for the server itself, not a user on the system, but for the server. Okay, the private key is kept on the server and kept secure. The public key, the first time we try and connect to the server, okay, with our public key, the public key from the server is going to be provided to us okay, and we take that file, we take that key that the server sends to us, and we put it in this file called the .ssh known host file. Okay, this is the key that came from the server, from the public key. So we have a copy of that in our home directory here in the known host file. Okay, do you remember when we were doing the Gen2 installation? Okay, the first time you connected, it said, do you really want to connect? And we had to say yes, and then we were able to SSH into it and do whatever we needed to. If you had to reboot your Gen2 system, you got that error message saying the key doesn't match, okay, and you had to execute that SSH command to delete the key. Okay, what happened is this key, the public key from the server, from the initial boot session of the Gen2 system, okay, we had taken that public key and stored it on our local system, on our Linux, what were we using, Mint, right? Okay, it got stored on our Mint system. When we rebooted the Gen2 system, the Gen2 system regenerated a new public-private key pair. And that public key that was stored here was associated with the IP address for our Gen2 system. And when we tried to connect to it using SSH from the Linux Mint system, it said, hey, the public key for the server doesn't match the value that was stored in our known host file. So that command that we executed removed the public key from the known host file so that we could re-download the new public key and be able to access the system. So you've seen some of this process before, some of the key exchange. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so with this information, armed with this, we want to go ahead and we want to set up SSH access. We want to create these users, okay, and then we want to create SSH access to get to the other systems. Okay? Questions? All right, let's go ahead and create these users on this system and then start enabling and configuring SSH access to the other systems.
Are you walking us through?
No.
I wasn't planning on it. Do you want me to walk you through one?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's walk through one. Okay, so let's create, for the secure users, let's create one of these users on our Rocky system. Okay, and then we'll create or generate access onto the Gen2 system. Okay, so let's create. I'm going to create Sue. You can create whatever user you want. Okay, so my Rocky system is called Ulrich. So I'm going to resume this virtual machine. There's my web page.
He's
So you have your go away. Okay, so right now, if I cat out my Etsy password file, okay, the only user I have in there is me. Okay, so I want to create a new user, so I need to switch to root. So I'm going to do sudo-s. Okay, so how do we create a user? Okay, we did this in the last class. What? Add user? Is it add user or user add?
I'm looking at add user.
Okay, there's actually two commands, add user and end user add. On the Rocky system, I think we can use either one of them. They link together. On the Ubuntu system, that's not the case. Okay, one's a lower level command. Well, let's try add user here. Okay, so we want to add user Sue, right?
This is a security user.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's check our Etsy password file and see what we have in there now. tail/Etsy/password. Okay, so I created a user Sue. We gave her a home directory, home Sue. Okay, she's got a user ID. It's all set and ready to go, right?
The account's created. That's about it. We still have to create a group, right?
The account's created. Okay, yes, you need to create a group. Okay, and we need to add her to the group. So should we create the group now?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the command to add a group? Add group. Let's try add group. Okay, we're going to call this one sec. I'm going to spell it all out. Add group security. Command not found. Okay. Why is my system running so slow?
Group at work for me.
Oh, it looks like I'm doing an update in the background. Okay. Group add?
Yep.
Group add security. Okay, so let's check the Etsy groups file. Etsy group file, and sure enough, I have the new security group there. Okay. So does anybody remember how to add a user to a group?
User
It's user
mod
mod.
dash AG.
Okay, user mod
That's all I remember. Oh, there it is.
dash AG, and then we need to specify the user. No, is it the group and then the user?
Group first.
Yeah, group.
So security group, and we want to add Sue to it. Oh, that didn't work.
No capital lowercase a, capital G.
Oh. Capital G. Okay, so let's do tail/Etsy/group. Okay, so here we have our security group, and we can see that Sue is a member of that group. Okay, what else did I ask you to do in terms of this user account? What?
Pseudo access.
Permissions, they need to be able to have sudo access. Okay, so how do we add them to be able to do sudo?
User mod.
Okay, if we look at the group file, okay, the wheel group is the one that gives you access to sudo. Okay, so we want to add Sue to the wheel group. Okay, we could do it with that command. Okay, let's do it with that command that we just executed. So we want to do user mod -a capital G wheel Sue. So we want to add Sue to the wheel group.
No,
No group in this group like that.
Like a
Okay, so let's do Brett for Sue in /Etsy/group. Okay, so Sue has her own group. Sue is a member of the wheel group and Sue is a member of the security group. Okay, pretty straightforward. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to log in as Sue. Okay, we need to log in as Sue and be able to configure some stuff as the Sue account. So one way to do that is we can do the SU dash. This allows us to switch users. The dash says that we want to assume the environment for Sue. Okay, the environment is their home directory and all that sort of stuff. So here we're going to switch to the user Sue. Okay, now if I type ID, it looks like I'm Sue. I can see that I'm a member of the wheel group. I'm a member of the security group. Okay, so we're logged in as Sue. We're set and ready to go. What we want to do now is we want to set up the SSH capability.
I know how to assign the password.
Will you root?
It auto-assign the password.
Yeah, to the user. I don't know how to manage.
Yes,
to do
it
it.
is.
Where are you seeing that?
You didn't do it as root. You didn't
Oh,
do
do
it
I
as
need to
root.
read?
If you're root, you try to correct.
Oh, wait, is go root.
You guessed it wrong. It's your root for you. You have to be root when you do this.
I do that's probably what.
No, that is what happened. Like, I did-
Oh, it prompted you for a
If
password.
you're not
Yeah.
root.
Oh, yes, yes.
I do not do that. That's
Like, I think done it though before and it just like flashed.
Sorry.
Password for connecting with SSH.
So, you're probably going to need, so Sue's going to be logging in directly on the user system. Okay, that's where everybody's going to log in, okay, to their account. So Sue is going to need a password, okay, to log in there. When we use SSH, okay, we're going to be going to another system, and how she gets onto that system is going to be through public-private key pair. Okay, so there'll be a password associated with her private key. Okay, but there isn't necessarily a user account on the remote end. Okay, so the first thing we need to do on this system here, where Sue is going to be initiating her SSH connections, she's going to SSH from here over to the firewall. Okay, so we need to generate a public-private key pair for Sue here. Okay, so the way we're going to do that is we're going to do SSH-keygen. Let's spell that right. Keygen. I think that's right. Okay, so if we hit enter, it's going to say generating a public-private key pair. By default, it wants to save that in the home sue.ssh directory. That's where we want to save it. Okay. And it's going to be called ID_RSA. If you want to change that, you can. It's probably recommended to leave it the same or leave it the default value. Connor? Okay. So the command that we executed here was SSH-keygen. Okay, this is the command that we're going to use to generate a key for Sue.
That was one I missed.
You did this one?
I just did it over.
Oh, okay. So you ought to have the prompt here saying where you want to store the file.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and leave that there. Okay, so if we press enter, it creates the directory. Do we want a passphrase for this? Okay, you don't have to put a passphrase on it, but you should. So for simplicity, because I don't want to have to remember all kinds of complex passphrases, I'm going to use a very trivial one for Sue. Sue. Okay.
Wow.
It's too complicated.
Too complicated. Well, it's, you know, at my advanced age, if I can remember this one, I'll do everything. Okay, so it asks for the passphrase. I'm going to type that same passphrase again. okay? And it's going to generate the key and store it in that file.
Mine looks like a rabbit.
Okay, so this thing here is a visual representation of that key. Okay, how many of you have generated public-private key pairs using PuTTY to SSH into a system? Okay, using PuTTY, you get that little box and it says move the mouse around in there.
Oh,
Have you ever done that?
No,
Oh,
we haven't done that.
okay. As you're moving the mouse around in there, you're generating random data that's used to generate the key. Okay, on a Linux system, there's a special device called /dev/random. That generates and reads random data out of fluctuations in your power supply or something like that. I'm not sure where it is, but if you do an ls/dev/random, okay, you can see there's a device out there that as you read that device, it generates random data for you. So that's where it's getting the data for this RSA key. So let's go out and check the directory, look at the directory that it's listed here for suit. So change directory to .ssh/ or just .ssh. So if we look here, we're in this directory, home_su.ssh, and in here we have two files, the ID_RSA. This is our private key. Okay, and then we have ID_RSA.pub. This is the associated public key. Did you have a problem?
It's denying me permission access.
Are you logged in as Sue?
I'm logged in
As his user.
My user.
And you can't change directories to .ssh?
No, even though I should have.
Do an ls-l on it? Did you create it before?
Well, I'm just gonna
Change, you're gonna be home and then some subdirectory.
no, just kidding.
There we go.
Roger,
I was
what's-
Oh, okay.
I wasn't trying to.
Yes.
I have an issue.
I'm trying to find that original sample that you did.
So I can't.
Yes, random.
Which asks me for the password, but I've never since time. And my
This was on the
Okay, so
second.
Yeah.
Apparently 500
Okay, so.
You're wrong.
I believe he's proven.
Bro, just take admin.
Go ahead. So is that?
Remotely.
Signed in, it's my favorite.
Let's go.
I thought I told you so we're gonna have to know.
Let's just-
Where was it?
You were doing.
I did all I could do. So,
I was a computer, but I was a computer. Unintended to occur, but I did.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's. Did you do the future?
Yeah, I'm assuming I'll need to have them on anyway. So I didn't ask.
Okay. So, this library, space.
Why not? Why do? Why?
So those are.
Why exist when you
Okay.
cannot? Why did it not ask me for a password?
Because you're like, is that you?
I woke up and was like, I had to go to now. She was like, yeah.
This second one's over, doesn't have access to that user.
Okay.
I was until midnight, to be fair, that's my fault.
Okay.
Let's not I gotta read. I just want to get tired and then when I get better,
So-
we'll sleep.
If you try to do, okay, so, here, everybody, let's think about where we are here. Okay, we logged into this system originally as our user account, right? I logged in as Kirk to this system. Because that's the user account I created when I installed it. What was the first thing I did?
And run into.
Switch to.
I did a sudo command, okay? So I started off as Kirk, I sudoed, and I became root. Okay, so I am down one level from my original login prompt. Okay, I originally logged in as Kirk, now I'm root. Okay, then from root, what did I do?
Then we created.
I did a sudo command or an su command to switch users to su, right? Okay, so now I'm buried one level down further. If from su, I try and sudo to root, okay, I've got to have the password for the su account in order to sudo, right? Okay, su doesn't have a password yet, so I can't get down there. If I want to get to root, I'm already logged in as root, one level up. So all I have to do is exit from my su dash command. If I exit from user su, I'll get back to this root prompt, okay, and be still logged in as root. Okay, so if I just type an exit right here, okay, I'm back as root. I'm back up one shell level, okay, instead of buried down in there. I can exit out of here and go all the way back to Kirk. Okay, so you have to get this construct going in your mind when you're using the sudo command and the su command. You have to remember that every time you execute a command, one of these commands, you're burying yourself down another shell level, okay, as another user ID. And instead of keep going down further, sometimes it makes sense to go back up instead of deeper. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm gonna get back in as su. Okay, change back to .ssh. So let's take a look at these two files. Okay, let's do a cat ID_RSA. Okay, let's just cat that file out.
I mean, there's notes on this. I thought it was sensitive.
It's a big private key.
I don't keep notes.
Okay, so this is the contents of my private key. They begin open SSH private key. So this is what the private key looks like. This is a representation of those two fairly large, close to prime numbers.
What was that very last, like, 3-letter segment on like the command above?
The command you used.
The command to get this?
Yeah.
Oh, I did a cat on the file name, and the file name was ID_RSA. Okay, are you in the .ssh directory? Okay, you need to be logged in as su. You need to be in the .ssh directory. You should see these two files here. Okay, so that's the private key. Let's take a look at the public key. Okay, so now I'm going to cat out the public key file. So here's the public key file. Okay, notice the first of it starts off with SSH-RSA. Okay, and then we have all of this gibberish, which is the actual key, the public key. And then this last bit, I have su at localhost.local domain. Okay, typically you probably want to change that to indicate what server or what system you generated this system on, or this key on. Okay, so this is the public key file. This is the private key file. The public key file is what I want to transfer and copy over to my firewall. Okay, if I want to give su access to the firewall. Okay, so I'm going to start up my firewall. Fuego. Okay, whatever you called your firewall, fire it up.
Spicy.
Okay. So here we have kind of a chicken and egg kind of thing. Okay, we need to be able to get this key up to the server before we can actually log in. Okay, so we got a problem there. If we don't have access to the server, we're not going to be able to get the key up there. So typically, when we're administering this, okay, if a user generates their public-private key pairs, we need to say, you need to generate this, you need to assign a password to it, and me as the administrator, you need to send your public key to me, and I will place it in your directory on the server. Okay, so that then you have access to the server. We're going to do that all as one user because we're acting as both the administrator and the user, Sue, right? Okay, so typically you'd have two people involved in this process. Okay, so let's open another window here. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to SSH from here. Okay, now here I'm logged in as Kirk, right? Okay, so here I want to SSH over to my firewall. Okay, so I'm going to do SSH root at 172.22.4.11, I think is my IP address of my firewall. 2.24. .24.11. Okay, so I'm trying to SSH over to the root account on this IP address. Okay, it doesn't look like it's working. Is anybody having success besides me? Let's do a control C. Let's try and ping that IP address first. 4.11. Okay. Maybe I don't have my network set up yet. No, I do. On the firewall? Check and see what's going on here. That's the right IP address. SS-MTO. Okay, it is listening on that port.
What was that command you just did?
SS-MTL. Okay.
Oh, no, that's working. There it goes.
There it is.
There we go.
Okay, now it works.
Okay, so now I can
Just
ping.
wait a bit. Do it again. I just waited a bit and did it again.
Okay, I can ping, so I'm gonna try and SSH it again. SSH as root. Okay, and I can't get in. Okay, why is that? Okay, let's go check the firewall.
I can get it.
Okay, I think because we altered the configuration on your system already. I remember a couple people had questions about that. So let's take a look at our firewall. Okay, our firewall, the configuration that controls how SSH behaves on the firewall is going to be located in what directory? Etsy. Okay, configuration files are typically stored in Etsy, so we're going to change the directory to /Etsy, and there's an SSH directory inside there. Okay, all the SSH stuff is inside the SSH directory. So change directories to /Etsy/SSH, and if we do a listing, we can see that there's a couple files that control the SSH system. Okay, so here are all of the host keys. Okay, remember we generate a public-private key pair on the host. The private key gets stored on the host. The public key gets downloaded to the client system. So here you can see we've got DSA keys, EC DSA keys, okay, RSA keys, public and private. Okay, that's where, this is where all of those are stored. Okay, so these two files here configure how the client, if you use SSH on this system going out, how that's going to work. And here's the SSHD configuration. This is for connections coming into the system. So we want to take a look at this SSHD_config file. So let's edit that. Okay, there's a whole bunch of settings in here. A lot of these are commented out, but give us the default setting for it. Okay, for example, here, this says this is going to listen on any IPv4 address or any IPv6 address. If you have multiple connections and you only want your server to listen on specific connections, for example, if you have a firewall that has an external IP address and you don't want SSH on that, you can specify that you only want SSHD to listen on the internal addresses. Okay, this specifies the port. If you want to alter that, you can do that. What we need to look for in here is something associated with root. So let's do a search for capital R-O-O-T. Okay, if you do a search for that /root, you should come up with this entry here that says permit root login, prohibit password. So by default, this value is set to prohibit or prevent logins using a password only. Okay. This is the more secure and recommended configuration. This requires the user to have a public-private key pair. Okay, so we probably want to preserve this in the long run, but we want to change this temporarily so that we can get in and copy the public key over for the user suit. Xavier, did you have a question?
This is under NC /
What's the file name?
This is a SSHD_config in the SSHD or SSH directory. Okay, so what we want to do is with this line highlighted, permit root login. If you're on that and you're using VI, you can type Y twice, okay, which yanks a line into a buffer, and then you do a P, and it's going to put that line back in and essentially give you a duplicate copy of it.
Hold on, so we're doing that. No, man.
Did I lose everybody?
Yeah.
No.
What'd you do again? To Yankees?
I confused you.
Yeah, sorry.
That's right. So where are you?
I'm on that same line.
You're on the same line? Just type YY, which yanks a line, and do a P, which puts it back in. Okay,
Okay.
puts it below the current cursor position so it duplicates.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. The
Just to, yeah, you yank it and then you put it. Okay, a couple of VI commands that speed things up a little.
Well, at first, it was giving me. the-
Okay, are we all here? Do we all have this line twice?
So
Does anybody need another minute?
it'd be a regular user, but.
Okay, so what we want to do is we want to uncomment this line. So I'm going to type an X to delete that pound sign. I'm going to type a capital W, which is going to move me over to the beginning of the next space separated word.
The first hashtag.
all these trees that I don't know.
And then I'm going to type C capital W to change the word, and I'm going to say yes. C capital W, with your cursor under the P, if you do a C capital W, that says I want to change this whole space separated word. Okay, CW, change the word. A C lowercase w would have only changed this prohibit part. A C capital W changes all of this. Okay, and I'm going to change it to yes. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to permit root login temporarily while we get our keys up here, but eventually we want to comment this line out and have the default, okay, take precedence again once we get the keys copied up here. Okay, does everybody have this? We need another minute. Okay, let's save this and exit.
Chronic will start Chronic D by default.
Okay, we're on Gen 2. We've made a change to a configuration file, so we need to restart the service. How do we do that here?
Reboot.
RC service.
Reboot, that will certainly do it. There's a better way to do it.
RC service.
RC-service. Okay, that's a good start. What else do we need to specify?
SSH.
SSHD, we need to specify the service that we want to restart. SSHD, and then we need to specify
Stop or restart.
restart. Okay, so RC-service SSHD restart should get us to restart the service. And that configuration change should now take effect. Okay, so let's go back over to our user system.
This is the fun you're
Really?
the whole time, bro.
Okay, so let's retry this SSH to root at the IP address of our firewall again and see if we're able to get in.
Yes. But you were able to- No, I wasn't. No, I could, I think, connect to it. but
Oh,
not-
okay.
Okay, so did everybody get this right here?
Yeah.
Okay, the authenticity of host blah, blah, blah cannot be established. ECDSA key fingerprint is SHA blah, blah, blah. Okay, what is this right here?
Your public key.
From where? From the server. Okay? Remember on our, not that diagram. Where's our other diagram? This diagram. Okay? So we're trying to get this transferred over. The first time we connect using SSH, the server is transferring its public key over to our system. Okay, so that's what's just happened. That message that we just saw is this public key being transferred to our local system. Okay, so let's go back over here. Are you sure you want to continue connecting? So ideally, what we should do is we should check this fingerprint against the server, okay, to verify that those fingerprints match and that we're not storing some man in the middle key on our system. Okay, so let's go ahead and say yes here. Okay, so it tells us that that key has been permanently added to the list of known hosts. In just a minute, we'll go in and we'll check, okay, the known host file on this system for this user and see if that key is in there. Okay, we need to enter the password for our root account on the firewall. Okay, I can't help you with that, so I'm going to let you go ahead and type your password. Okay, did everybody get that to work?
I'm still trying to get in. It's denying. So.
That's 9. Don't get it wrong. There's someone in
It's the IP stuff.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
It's like a dream and I just can't get into it. It's not like it's
Okay, are you getting their message at all?
No, it's just not done. It's just not doing
Which
it.
The one directly.
The one directly.
Not the
And
net.
the other
Nice and
is the Gen 2 system.
Oh,
too.
he's been on there.
I use that. Yeah.
No, it works.
I'll try to.
We go through. Okay, exit. Stop that, you should be able to SSH.
Yeah, that'll work.
You know,
Yeah,
actually,
that's
no,
I guess.
it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you should be able to SSH in using
Yeah.
How the others, whatever.
it's not that.
Right around
Yeah.
17, it's not working. Yeah,
Okay.
it just sits there and then there's no.
No, it's a password.
Okay.
So just like.
Okay, so, because eventually we want to drop the NAT connection and be able to get all of this working without that. So it seems like you've got some sort of problem that needs to be looked at. Okay, but let's proceed. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is let's open a new terminal window as the user that we SSH into the firewall. So let's go up to the terminal, click on new window. This is going to open a new session as Kurt. Okay, that's the user that I use to SSH into the firewall. So let's change directories to .ssh and look in here. And now we have a known host file in here. Okay, so if we cat out the known host file, okay, there we see, okay, the public key for the server and the IP address associated with it. Okay, so this is the IP address of our firewall. Okay, this is the public key for the firewall. So I'm going back to our SSH access diagram.
Hold on, that directory is not being found. Yeah, that directory doesn't exist.
No, as
No,
you
even if it has ready bitches, it doesn't exist.
Okay, what user in this window here, what user were you logged in as before
So
you
I
executed the SSH command?
The SSH, I was, because that's.
Oh, okay, so then you need to look in the root user directory. Okay, what directory did you look in for root?
Okay,
So that's just the name of my.
I remember one of the servers was the file server by Cat.
So let's go host.
Was that yours?
Yeah, 4 right here. Something like that.
One thing, like, but you got smart. Now,
This is a Windows, this is Linux. Pretty sure you will put a space after this.
Okay, so back to our diagram here. Okay, so we tried to SSH in. Okay, this system then provided its public key, which got stored onto our local system for this particular user. Okay? All right, so now that we're logged into our firewall, okay, we want to okay, we're logged in as root and we want to give Sue access as root. Okay, so because Sue wants to access the root account, that's where we need to put her public key file. Okay, so we need to change directories to roots.ssh. So let's see if that exists. ls-a. Okay, there is not a directory called .ssh for the root account on our firewall. So let's create it, mkdir.ssh. Then we want to change directories into .ssh. Okay, of course we do an ls, there's not going to be anything in it, so we want to edit the authorized keys file, authorized _ keys.
Can you bring that window up? I don't know.
Okay. So this file, okay, is the file on the target system. Okay, so we want to access this system as root. Okay, so the roots directory under SSH authorized keys, this is where we need to store Sue's public key. Okay, so that she will be able to SSH in and access that account on the target system. Okay, so here in this file is where we need to put Sue's public key. So let's go find her public key. Okay, here I am logged in as Sue. Here's Sue's public key. So I should be able to highlight this. The entirety of it. You need to get the SSH-RSA at the beginning. Okay, and you want to include all of the comment at the end of the file. Okay, so I want to do copy and paste. So I think I can do a Control-Shift-C.
can also right click.
And then over on my firewall, in the new authorized keys files, I want to go into insert mode and paste that in there. I'm going to change my comment so I have Sue at Ulrich, which is the name of my user system. Okay, so basically this says Sue at Rocky. So I changed that so I know where that key was generated. Yes.
Log into that file again?
To this file?
Yes.
Okay, this file is the .ssh file for, or authorized key file for the root user. Let me save it and I'll show you, okay? Okay, I made a change here, so let me go ahead and exit out. Okay, so if I change directories to the root user's home directory, Okay, I did a CD, I'm in the root user's home directory. So I need to do mkdir.ssh because the directory doesn't exist yet. So I need to make that directory. I already did it, so I can't execute it again. Okay, then I want to change directories to cd.ssh. Okay, you with me? Okay, if you do an ls, there shouldn't be anything there because you just created it. So you want to edit vi authorized keys file. Okay, you're gonna have to specify the full name. And inside that file is where you want to paste that key. Yep, you bet.
Pasting the public key.
What's that?
Pasting the public key.
Yeah, yeah, you want to get the public key into that file.
And then get rid of the local domain.
And then you want to do that.
Yes, you don't have to. The end of this file, this is just a comment, and it can say anything you want. I typically like to have the username at the system where I've generated that key. It seems to make sense to me so that I know where that key, who the user is, and where they're starting off, where they're initiating the connection. Okay, so my system, my user system is called Ulrich, so I put Ulrich in there. Okay, so once I've done this, once I've saved that in the authorized key file, okay, there's a couple more things that I have to check. So go ahead and get out of that file once you've got it in there.
I'm behind, my SSH kicked me out before I could paste it.
Okay. All right. Let me know when you catch up. Has everybody else got the contents in that file there? Jalen, no?
My thingy is not working.
Oh, okay, so you're still not able to SSH in?
Yeah.
Okay. While Connor's looking at that, let me see if I can help you.
I'm trying to do that.
This says the VI authorized.
So what's
keys
this going
in
on
that
here? This is
.sh
your
directory
system.
and Fuego
Okay, so
created.
it's with IP space A. Okay, so this was, this way it is.
So that's good.
This is 238.14. Okay, so let's go over to your file.
As far as we are.
Because the
Okay, so I think part of the problem is not knowing where is an observed address that's used by the So I think if you change those IP addresses to like 11, I guess. So
Would I? Since I did it for both.
I don't think I put anything in there.
yes, yes, so both of those should be 11. I had it on my side. That's one. I'm not sure I should change that.
What is
So,
it? What is that?
Generate and apply.
Actively.
Yeah, it will let me apply.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
So in here,
You
change
should
that to just VI slash
You want to take a photo of
slash data. These two, yeah.
Is that natural stuff?
Chemistry's annoying.
It's all.
Oh, yeah, no, there's something about it.
I just had to remind you of that.
They took it out of the
Astronomy was like.
Astronomy was just annoying because you have to do a lot of, it's a lot of math.
It wasn't the only three that you like ever so do the
Astronomy
same.
Under the S.
One small thing.
Under the.
Makes sense. So it's basically.
More so it's.
Okay. Because I had to do stuff with like what I'm
Exactly. Good.
I had to do calculations for like travel time and stuff. Also, Zach.
Okay, so the last couple of things we need to do is we need to ensure that the authorized key file and the .ssh directory has the appropriate permissions on it. Okay, for the root user, if the root owns it, okay, it's probably going to be fairly restricted anyway, but for a normal user, it's very important that the user own the file and the directory, and that the permissions are restricted to only that user. Okay, so let's check both of those things. So let's do an ls-l and look at the authorized keys file. Okay, so the root owns it. Okay, this is the user and they own it. That's good. But notice we have read permission for the group and the world. We want to get rid of those. So the permissions that we want to set on this file are change own. We want it to be 600. So we want the user to be able to read and write the file and nobody else be able to do anything else on it. Okay, so we want to change, sorry, I said change own. That should be change mode, shouldn't it? My bad.
Change mod.
Change mod, yes.
600.
Change mod 600 authorized
May
keys.
not bad.
Okay, so now if I do an ls-l, sure enough, the owner is the only one who can read and write that file. If somebody else can read and write it to that file, then the SSH daemon says, hey, I can't use that file because I'm not guaranteed that it's safe, that it hasn't been altered. Yes.
Do we have to do all of this for the other security users as well?
For every user, and to get development to get to the web server, yeah, you need to do this for all of the users on every system.
So do you just space them out by like a line break or something when you add another public key, or do they each have to have their own?
In the authorized keys file?
Yeah.
No, if they're all going to the same target system, they can all be, for example, the two security users should be able to access root on the firewall. So both of those can be in this same file.
Okay.
So here you just need to add another key.
So just like a line down or something.
Yeah, no blank lines in there, just,
Okay.
yeah, just a new line. It's all one big long line.
Okay.
Okay, so the other thing we have to check in this file is we need to do ls-ld. What is the D gonna do?
Those directories?
Yeah, it's gonna list the information about my current directory. Okay, so this directory that I'm looking at is the .ssh directory. Okay, and this directory needs to be only read, write, and executable by the owner. Okay? So I need to do the same change, but instead of a 6 this time, I need to do 700. So the owner can execute it. Okay? So change mode 700 dot is going to change the permissions so that the owner can have full access to it, but nobody else can do anything to it. Okay? So these two changes are very important. We need to make sure that the authorized keys files, that the access to that is restricted, and the same is true for the directory, the .ssh directory, that's only accessible by the owner of the file. Okay, once we've got that in place, we should be able to go back over to our system as Sue. And we should be able to do an SSH to root at 172.22.4.11. Not sure if that's right. Yeah, 22.4.11. Okay, and I should be able to get in. Now notice that the first time I connect as Sue, I get this message again. Okay, the last time when I connected here, I connected as Kirk, and the known host file for Kirk was populated with this public key. Here we're populating the known host file for the user Sue. Okay, so here I want to go ahead and say yes. Okay, it asks me for the passphrase. I'm going to enter the very complex secure passphrase of Sue, and kaboom, I get in. Okay, did everybody get that to work? Okay, whether you did or didn't, okay, we're almost out of class time. We've got about 15 minutes here left.
Sorry, I was distracted. What did you say about the passphrase?
I put in my passphrase, whatever passphrase you set up for your SSH key. For me, it was really simple. I used Sue for the passphrase. because I didn't want to have to remember anything. Okay? Okay, so this process right here, guys, pay attention here for just a minute. This process right here, as an IS person, okay, this is something that you should be doing every single day. Okay, you should be using SSH for everything. Okay, when you get out in the corporate environment, this process of setting up public-private keys, getting those keys put in the right directory, okay, all of that is something that should be second nature to you. Part of the reason that I have you do this for 5 users on 3 different systems, I can count, on 3 different systems, is because I want you to go through this multiple times, okay? It really is something that you should, it should be just like building a virtual system, okay? You should be able to spin up a virtual system in your sleep. The same thing is true of this process, okay? I can't stress that enough, okay? Your communications between your systems should be secure, and this is the way to do it, using public-private keys and getting the permissions set up correctly to enforce that. Okay, so the next couple of days we're going to be spending on this, okay, and trying to get this all set up for those users. Okay, all right, we have a little bit of time left. If you want to stick around and work on this again for a second user, go through the process. For me, I had Sue and some other S user. Okay, if you want to go through the process again, I'd be happy to coach you on that. I've recorded this at somebody's request, and so I will upload the recording to our YouTube channel so that you can refer back to that if you need to. Okay? Yes, Xavier.
I've heard no what we've done, and then I just want people to see if I can see.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for the group here? All right. I'm going to go ahead and shut off the mic. And I'll just help you if you need help. Okay, so SSH keygen.
This is all what we did.
Okay. So yes. So we did this for me. Okay, and so you're going to duplicate this for the second one. You don't have to do some of these things. You don't have to make your command, change directory command, or you change modus commands for the second secure user because you already did those and now that it's set up. All you have to do is add it to the reference. So it's the second. Yes, but that's, I think you got one. Good.
And then for the dev stuff, are we gonna do that? Okay.
So the dev stuff should be exactly the same as this. It's just going to be different user accounts, different names, but it should be.
No real.
Yeah. Yes. But for the dev accounts, the one thing that's going to be different on the dev accounts is the dev account should be logging in as a normal user. So they're going to have so I had Dawn for my communicated Dawn.
CTL reboot.
Yeah,
using your user system.
And you rebooted your
And
system.
you're going to create a Dawn account on your website. And then they should be able to SSH from one.
Still working on that
From
one.
Dawn, because it's the same username. But the
Rocky's
username
telling
doesn't matter.
Miles here.
Okay, if it's the same username, that's assumed, so you don't, that's
Yeah.
In the development.
yeah, just but you should be able to, but all the setup is exactly the same. You need the SSH directory, you need the authorized key file, you need all of that exactly the same.
You want to do the dev one?
Okay,
Slightly.
okay, go
Because
ahead.
it's,
Right now, before class ends, create the second secure user
And doing it.
and try and get their key added to the authorized keys file for root and see if you can get that.
so,
That'll kind of solidify it in your. looks like chocolate. You ever rock climbing?
No, but I
And rock climbing, you.
Yeah.
You do have rock climbing too.
No,
you
not
your
classic.
fingers like right on
Oh
the-
my god.
I was just gonna ask if.
Yeah, so you just drop them and get out.
Means I can shave my beard.
All the keys in the same.
Shave my
file?
beard.
So, yes, well, all the keys that should have access to that.
Oh.
Okay, so this is on your firewall, right?
It's a lot.
Yes, so this is your firewall. So the only two users who should have access to the firewall are the two security users. So the second security user. Your,
You should do that.
Okay, so
See what's the time?
It's gonna be like a
Yeah, I'm
different-
turning the next stuff. I was debugged to me and I'm both cut.
Yes, and on a different system.
Oh, I mean,
Web server. Yes.
We don't want big.
And with them, for example.
I might want to like switch.
Switch user.
On my web server, I didn't have any other account. And Dawn is going to access your.
Mission for Java. Jeremy, would you? Hey, yo, you need to calm down, bro.
From user system should
See,
be.
You broke Ronnie. How'd you break Ronnie? You're what? Yeah, we're fine.
Why is he not a vacuum? Because definitely one shows. Yeah, it's above ground, but their stuff was.
Sure.
It's a commercial. I can't CD into my S3. It says permission denied. I don't, I guess I'm missing a step or something.
Ronnie comp 5.
Because here's I generated the key, when I try to get in, there's
Did you generate the key again?
well, I've done it twice now, but yeah, now this time I have him, I'm in his.
I tried to do it like 6 times.
So,
That's not saying. Looks like all fast.
home set to.
I'm debating.
I think CTL.
Just have an admin.
Oh, it's with the.
Name the
I'm
admin.
wondering,
Welcome letter.
Could we?
Yeah.
You're already in that directory.
No.
but yeah, I have just permission to look at it.
Do an
I
LS.
can go upstairs, I can show you on my desktop. I can show you.
Do
on
an
my-
LS-LD.
Can you send a word?
Permission denied.
Yes, we can see conventions. Unlike you can.
Somehow I'm in it, but without permission.
That's not.
Do ID.
Now do type ACTL should.
The media package.
MST, currently see track should also.
Go change directories up on the CD dot dot.
Is it enabled?
Can't.
Just exit.
This is,
Okay, so type PWD.
So
rock.ssh.
That's my default.
That's your default account, that's the one you created? Okay, so do an ls-l.
Every, no, I won't go that one, but.
Okay, so you got your line posted here. So change directories to /home.
I don't know.
Oh, which
I have to
one?
do
They
this.
unloaded.
Change directory to do an ls-l.
There's no trunk loader mod, so you
That's
can.
fine. That's a chronic.
Okay, so I think what happened was, I think you
I don't think
did
it was
this
synced.
S3 command, I think you were in your home directory. See, there's no .ssh here. You're in the sec2, there's no .ssh in there. Cool. So, okay, so do an su dash space
Yeah, some people
sec2,
also use Minecraft.
enter. Do PWD.
Since it's such a small.
Okay, so now you're there, so let's do that SSH dash keygen, get that again.
We just had to set it up.
We can't do that with the.
Sure, override.
Wait.
Really spawn under.
Oh, say no.
So, yeah.
So, oh, you know what, I forgot to put the A on here. So change directories, do an ls-la.
So you know,
Okay, so there it is. So change directories to .ssh. Do an ls. Okay, so there they are. So cat out your _rsa.py.
Vanilla Minecraft.
Yeah, vanilla. But there's
Okay, so it says sec2, so that looks right.
Sometimes for some, if you have some your mods or whatever, you can't have a dimension.
But the thing is that we've checked every pixel and stuff.
Yep.
Second time.
Awesome.
Well, you're not root.
So just type O to open a new line. There you go. That's all one line. That's why you can scroll down. You gotta get Okay.
Yes.
We would need to, by the way, there is.
Okay, so part of what's confusing here is this is the new entry that you need.
There is, by the way, one here that I may need you to add permissions for at least on that too, because there's a command for E.
Okay, so now try to use the upper. See, so here's the first entry, here's the second one. You, before you hit this window, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Okay.
Now, push the up arrow.
Again?
Yeah. It's
Okay, you
just-
see that? That means that there's a line that wraps around too far to display.
Okay.
So that's why you got the tilde means that's the end of the file, or it has to be the end of the file. And the at sign means there's one more, but you just can't see it. Okay, so now you should be able to SSH from soon.
It's linked to permanent.
Maybe it's not, we could let it.
Yeah, so assuming it works in your, in the, and you can't do between the other and that.
Yeah, that's-
No, it's something you don't create.
And I didn't want to get permission over I was testing with it on this guy and I was able to get things. The only problem is it just gives me the error that stuff is running, but in your case, stuff will be running. See, it might just say it's open another program. I think I know how to get permission over it.
You wanna try it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this example? You do a, some of those plugins. Some of those plugins.
So do I need,
And then everything.
Hey, Drew, I emailed.
And then do it.
No, it was on. Well, no, that's.
No, Matt is working on NTP right now.
No.
Okay, well, so here's the thing, so I'm about to finish NTP. And then I would finish that module. I still have to go back to the previous one, finish Gen 2 and the network setup.
Oh.
Yeah, Matt's not Gen 2.
Oh.
Gen 2. Gen 2 has given him fits. Gave me issues. He's recreated Gen 2 like 2 or 3 times.
2, 3 times?
Dude, I'm sorry.
Actually, the broken.
And I was gonna work on it last night, but then I ended up working straight from 5 to 8 because Arcadia, or one of my sites went down last night because Utopia had cut fiber on site. Oh, they're dumbasses. And then they didn't know until 30 minutes into the event and posted. They were like, oh, hey, we were just notified that our site's been down. And I was like, it's been down for the last 30 minutes or been, I knew in the first 2.
You're like, I knew right at first because when people's internet go down, they let you know.
And the thing is,
They let you know.
yeah, I had a Zoom call within the first 2 minutes to let me know. And even worse is Arcadia is a
Okay.
200 unit complex. So I
Okay.
had all of them
I think we'll
call
probably
and
try and go over
email
it
me
tomorrow.
within
Okay.
the first 2 hours.
Jeremy, did the command work?
So I got swamped last night.
What? There is no command. I gave him permission. He has full permission of it now. As long as nothing is running, he should be able to delete them.
Oh.
Ideally,
It looks like it's gonna work.
I wondered, I'm like, is it a permission level issue?
we had to